What's gaming gamers? Today, I've got a Strand Warlock build for you using the exotic head armor Nezarec Sin. This build is meant to be an alternative to the Necrotic Grips and Osteostriga build, although it's slightly inferior in pure add clear capabilities. This build mainly uses the exotic bow Le Monarch, but any void weapon will work in a similar fashion. Because of Le Monarch's intrinsic overload capabilities, this build is more future-proof for endgame content. Right now, SMGs have anti-overload capabilities due to the artifact, but if they don't in the future, this build will be a good alternative if you're doing Master or Grandmaster content with overload champions. As a quick aside, before the video starts, I'd like to quickly talk about my content schedule going forward. From now on, I'll be putting out 2 videos a week, one on Tuesdays and one on Fridays. I will keep the same schedule of Hunter, Titan, Warlock, so expect 2 Hunter videos next week, followed by 2 Titan videos the week after, and to round out the rotation, 2 Warlock videos the 3rd week. My hope is that it'll introduce more build variety instead of just going over the newest or best builds. I love the niche builds with exotics that aren't good but are still fun to use, and I want to make more of those, but I also understand that the meta builds are important to know, so I'll try to make some of both. If you want to be notified when those go live, subscribe. Nezarec Sin is an exotic that increases all ability regeneration rates when getting kills with void energy. These kills can come by way of ability or weapon, letting Nezarec Sin be used on subclasses other than void so long as you're using void weaponry. Upon getting a void damage kill, you gain a buff called Abyssal Extractors for 2.5 seconds. Abyssal Extractors can be both refreshed and lengthened by getting another kill with void damage, increasing by 2.5 seconds for every void kill up to a maximum of 20 seconds. Abyssal Extractors increases your base grenade and melee recharge rates by 300% and increases your class and super ability base recharge rates by 200%. Now to talk about the subclass. This build is pretty set in stone, but there's always room for slight changes, so I'll put everything up on screen for a prescriptive setup if that's what you prefer, and then after, I'll describe what changes you can make as well as the reasoning behind each choice. Firstly, run the Needlestorm Super. Run whichever rift you prefer, whichever jump you prefer, the Arcane Needle melee ability, the Shackle Grenade, the Weaver's Call aspect, the Mind Spun Invocation aspect, Thread of Continuity, Thread of Generation, Thread of Mind, and Thread of Warding. To go over the options, Needlestorm is the only super. I actually enjoy this super. I've always preferred burst damage supers to roaming supers, but as there's no other options, preference plays no part. For your Rift, however, it's entirely your choice which you run. Healing Rift will keep you alive if you find yourself out of position, and Empowering Rift will give you 20% increased damage while standing inside it. Generally, I run Healing Rift, but they both have the same cooldown, so choose which Rift you use based on your personal playstyle. For your melee ability, Arcane Needle is again the only option, but it's a really good melee in my opinion, being similar to the Titan Strand melee in that it applies a Strand debuff, but instead of severing targets like the Titan melee does, Arcane Needle unravels them. Unravel is a debuff that, when applied to a target, will summon 3 tracking unraveling threads that track to enemies nearby, applying Unravel to those targets and damaging them. Upon receiving additional damage, unraveled targets will spread Unravel to other enemies nearby. Unravel's base duration is 9 seconds and can be refreshed by having one of the threads damage the target again. Onto your grenade, this build makes heavy use of the Shackle Grenade when paired with the Mind Spun Invocation aspect, but I'll go over that interaction shortly. The first aspect is Weaver's Call. This will summon 3 Threadlings upon casting your Rift, and will also deploy any Threadlings you have perched at the same time. Mind Spun Invocation is the second aspect, and it's the biggest part of this build when paired with the Shackle Grenade. Mind Spun Invocation will augment all 3 of the grenades available to the Strand subclass, those being the Grapple, Shackle, and Threadling grenades. The bonus the Grapple Grenade receives is that it spawns 3 Threadlings when using the melee attack after having grappled to an enemy. Mind Spun Invocation also allows you to consume both the Shackle Grenade and the Threadling Grenade. Consuming the Threadling Grenade instantly purchases 5 Threadlings onto you, which can then be deployed by either damaging enemies or casting your Rift. The Shackle Grenade's consume bonus is what this build is built around, however. After consuming your Shackle Grenade, you get a buff called Weaver's Trance. Weaver's Trance lasts for 25 seconds and can only be refreshed by consuming another Shackle Grenade. While Weaver's Trance is active, any final blow you get will create a suspending explosion at that enemy's position, suspending any enemies nearby. Moving on to the fragments for this build, Thread of Continuity is the first fragment to choose. This fragment will increase the duration of strand debuffs you apply by 50%, increasing the uptime of Suspend, Unravel, and Sever. This gives you more time to dispatch of suspended enemies, which is incredibly beneficial in in-game content. Thread of Generation is next, which simply grants you grenade energy upon dealing damage of any type. Poison Ticks from Le Monarch will proc Thread of Generation as it deals damage, which is the main reason Le Monarch is used specifically over other void weapons. Thread of Mind is the third fragment, and it grants you class ability energy upon killing any enemy that's suspended. This one's good for keeping your Rift charged as consistently as possible, making sure you have it when you need it. The last fragment has a couple of options. Thread of Warding and Thread of Wisdom are really the only 2 choices, with Thread of Warding being a survivability pick and Thread of Wisdom being an Orb of Power generating pick. Thread of Warding will grant you Woven Mail upon picking up an Orb of Power, granting you an extra 60% damage resistance for 10 seconds. This is a good option for activities wherein you take a lot of damage, but also have opportunities to pick up Orbs of Power you've created. Thread of Wisdom will spawn an Orb of Power upon killing a suspended enemy with a Precision Final Blow, which you should be doing often so long as you're using Le Monarch to its fullest potential. Overall, they're both good options. I use them both almost interchangeably, so play around with both of them and see which one works best for you specifically. Now that the subclass is out of the way, I'll go over your seasonal artifact really quickly if you're watching this during Season 20, the Season of Defiance. In the first column, run whichever anti-champion mods you need for the activity you're planning on going into. In the second column, grab the authorized mods for void weapons and grenades, as well as the multi-siphon mod. In the third column, grab the shatter orbs mod and the volatile flow mod. Lastly, in the fourth column, grab bricks from beyond and counterweave. This will leave you with one leftover artifact mod to grab whichever mod you want, as there aren't any other mods that help this build specifically. With the seasonal artifact done, I can get into the armor build. Firstly, for your stats, in the top 3 grouping of mobility, resilience, and recovery, spec into resilience and recovery equally with a slight bias towards resilience. Ignore mobility altogether, as it's effectively a useless stat for warlocks. For the bottom 3 grouping of discipline, intellect, and strength, spec into discipline first, with strength as a secondary stat, and ignore intellect altogether. The biggest requirement for this build is discipline, so get that to at least 80. Strength will increase your melee abilities uptime, which will be helpful for ability regen later, but it isn't as important as discipline. Intellect is a useless stat at the moment, so pretend it doesn't exist. My armor build has me at tier 2 mobility, tier 9 resilience, tier 7 recovery, tier 9 discipline, tier 3 intellect, and tier 5 strength. To get into your armor mods, I'll put the prescriptive setup on screen first, and then go over each choice in detail after. On your helmet, put on as many void siphon mods as you can fit. On your arms, slot 1 impact induction mod and 2 focusing strike mods. On your chest piece, put as many charged up mods as you can fit. For your legs, slot a stacks on stacks mod and 1 or 2 void surge mods. Lastly, on your bond, run a time dilation mod and 2 outreach mods. Now I'll get into specifics about the armor mods. For your helmets mods, you want at least 1 void siphon mod to make sure you're creating orbs of power from multi-kills with void weapons. The more siphon mods you have equipped, the more potent the orb will be, meaning it will give you more super energy, but that's not as important as making sure you're creating orbs in the first place, so if you feel you want a special or heavy ammo finder, put one on. For your arms, you should take 1 impact induction and 2 focusing strike mods. Impact induction will grant you 20% grenade energy upon dealing melee damage on a 7-second cooldown. Importantly, it doesn't require you to deal damage with your powered melee ability, letting you simply use your unpowered melee if you're out of powered melee charges. With 2 focusing strike mods equipped, you will get 25% class ability energy back upon dealing melee damage with the same 7-second cooldown as impact induction. Again, focusing strike doesn't require you to deal damage with your powered melee, so if you're out of charges, you can melee something with your unpowered melee and still be granted that energy. On your chest piece, grab 2 charged up mods. Charged up will increase the amount of stacks of armor charge you can have, with the maximum increasing by 1 per charged up mod slotted, up to a maximum of 6. With 2 charged up mods, you'll be able to have a maximum of 5 stacks of armor charge, and if you have any energy left in your chest piece, slot a harmonic resistance mod for an extra 15% damage resistance to incoming strand damage. For your legs, run a stacks on stacks mod and a void surge mod. If you're playing during Season of Defiance, you'll be able to slot 2 void surge mods so long as you're using the authorized void mod seasonal artifact mod, so slot 2 of them for a 17% bonus to void weapon damage. Having only 1 surge mod will increase your damage from weapons with that energy affinity by 10%, which is still a significant bonus, so be sure to slot 1. Stacks on stacks will increase the amount of stacks of armor charge you gain from picking up an orb of power by 1, to a maximum of 2 stacks of armor charge per orb pickup. This effectively doubles your armor charge uptime, making it a super useful mod for keeping your surge mods active and applying their damage boost. Lastly, for your bond, run a time dilation mod and 2 outreach mods. Time dilation will increase the decay timer for your armor charge stacks by 50%, making them take 15 seconds to decay instead of 10 seconds. If you have your maximum 5 stacks of armor charge, this gives you 75 seconds, or 1 minute and 15 seconds, to grab another orb of power to keep that up, instead of 50 seconds without time dilation. The 2 outreach mods will grant you 25% melee energy upon casting your rift as a warlock, which allows you to unravel more targets as well as proc the impact induction and focusing strike mods in your arms from a safe distance instead of having to use an unpowered melee. Now that the armor build's out of the way, I can go over weapons I recommend for this build. Le Monarch will be your best option for the energy slot by far. It has AoE potential similar to Osteostriga, but it does void damage, so it synergizes with Nezarec's Sin. Additionally, the poison damage caused by Le Monarch counts as void damage, and will also synergize with Nezarec's Sin and grant you the Abyssal Extractor buff. I believe Le Monarch to be the best weapon for this build, but if you want something different, any other void weapon in the game will work with Nezarec's Sin. For your heavy slot, machine guns work really well, with Commemoration being the standard option in my opinion. Retrofit Escapade would work as well, especially with the Volatile Flow seasonal artifact mod, but Commemoration will be more consistent overall. My weapons when I run this build consist of Le Monarch in the energy slot, Commemoration in the heavy slot, and the kinetic slot has a weapon to cover whichever other champion I need. This season is mostly filled with a pulse rifle for anti-barrier champions, as unstoppables can be suspended to be stunned. As for the playstyle for this build, it's super simple. Before entering an engagement, consume your shackle grenade and go to town killing and suspending everything. After Weaver's Trance's 25 seconds is up, consume another grenade and continue killing and suspending everything. If your grenade hasn't recharged by the time Weaver's Trance goes away, use your melee ability and get the extra 20% grenade energy back. Also, with how fast you'll be recharging your grenade, don't be afraid to simply throw your shackle grenade at high priority targets, like champions or Vex Wyverns. You don't have to consume it every time. You can choose based on what enemies you'll be going up against if consuming or throwing your grenade will be the better option. So use your judgment and your knowledge of the encounters you'll be entering. And that's all for the build. Overall, this one's super simple. I wanted to make a build that was an alternative to the Necrotic Grips build that everyone's using, because I figured it'd be more interesting to do something a bit different than just rehash the same build everyone's already made a video on. I feel like I succeeded, but if you have any other ideas, comments, or criticisms, let me know in the comments. I read them all, and your guys' suggestions help me to make future videos better. If you guys would like to join our clan, the Tyrant Seraphs, I'll leave a Discord invite link in the description below for you to join. We're always looking for more people of any skill level. We run raids, pinnacle activities, and everything in between every week, so hop in. Other than that, again, I will be uploading 2 videos a week starting next week. Schedule will be Tuesdays and Fridays to hopefully get more builds out to you guys. If you want to be notified when those go live, subscribe. Have a great day.